Hello and welcome to More Than a Game. My name's Tommie C. Are you one of our regular listeners or watchers? Well, if you are, please jump online, send us a review on whatever platform it is that you might listen or watch us on. We love your feedback, and it really does help us improve and grow. A little bit unusual this week on More Than a Game. Obviously, it's a Wednesday, and we're coming to you live. With so many games being played on Sunday and Monday, we thought, well, why not? Like, we're not doing anything else midweek, so let's jump on, and Jesse and I are going to walk you through some of the things that have been happening in the last few days. So, Jesse, great to have you on board as always. You look like you've just you're settling in with some refreshments there on your Wednesday night.
Got to keep hydrated. It's a long week, especially in lockdown, and just treated myself to a what's on the agenda today? A Sensei. Hazy IPA. So strap yourself in once again. Let's see how she goes.
Man, I hope you don't get too hazy on the pod today. Alrighty. Look, because this is a midweek pod, we're not going to do any moment of the week or own goal, but there are a few things that we wanted to get through before we kick into the Premier League. First up, Jesse, who do you think won the US presidential debate today?
I haven't even watched it. I've basically all the stuff that I've seen has basically made me think, I've got other things I'd like to do with my afternoon, because everyone has just talked about how much of a absolute shit show it was. So unless you can say anything otherwise, I might have to go back for the highlights, the mini match of the debate, maybe.
That is a good call. That is a good call. All right. We'll leave. Regardless of what your politics are, I think we can all enjoy a little bit of kit chat. So let's jump into that, though. So, obviously, there were a whole bunch of kits that were released in the last 48 hours. You had 9 kits released by the Jets, Brisbane, Melbourne City, and Melbourne Victory, and then also Macarthur Bulls, Western Sydney Wanderers, Perth, and Sydney also had their kits leaked via sort of indirectly through FIFA 21 as well. Curiously, Western United, Wellington, and Central Coast are nowhere to be seen. Jesse, did you have a favourite out of any of the kits that you saw?
Well, because it's funny because we talk about some of the kits from today, but going back to one that was sort of brought out a lot earlier than everything else, the Adelaide home kit I quite like.
Yeah.
Which is kind of like, not so much a today story, but I guess it now kind of has its away kit to go with it, which a few people really like. A few people call it the McDonald's kit.
The cheeseburger kit, yeah.
The cheeseburger kit. So that's already got some good traction on social media. But out of them all, I mean, I think one of the early ones I saw was the Newcastle one. And I think most people, whether or not they are a Jets fan or not a Jets fan, you could probably always appreciate a good gold number. And the gold number looks really nice. From what I've seen. We haven't seen it in the flesh yet from what I've seen, but from the images, it looks good.
True. I'm really happy that they've brought back the gold kit. It's just a shame that it isn't their home kit, but well, I guess you can't have everything in life, right?
The City kit, Tommie, you must be pretty pleased with that. It looked pretty nice from what I saw.
Which one? They've released 3 today.
Well, I saw the third in the away, but the home kit, first and foremost, because you've got to get that right. Sure. Looks like it's a nice fabric.
Yeah, well, there's a little bit of detail in there as well, like sort of within the kit. I've noticed that with a lot of kits this year in the A-League or otherwise, that lots of kits are getting a little bit of texture in them as well, which is, I appreciate a little bit of texture. Just enjoying that. Did particularly like there's a lot of pinstripe across the league. Both of Newcastle's kits, obviously the cheeseburger kit's got some pinstripe, some horizontal pinstripe in it in Adelaide, and then Melbourne City's third kit, the red and white one, predominantly white but with red pinstripes. I think that's pretty nice too. So yeah, and also I guess we also did get our first glimpses of, although not on an actual human, we did get our first glimpse of Macarthur Bulls' jersey, and I like that bull motif, like that you can stuff that up still, but they seem to have done a pretty decent job with that so far. Lee Broxham Facts wants to know if the team who first releases a long sleeve kit should win, just the league.
I'm not going to argue with that because I love a good long sleeve number. I'm a bit of a sucker for the long sleeve kit when done properly. I can't argue with that rationale.
I think that's a fantastic call. It would definitely make the season a lot safer in this COVID environment as well. He's got a follow-up question, which is, if More Than a Game was a shirt front sponsor, which kit would it suit the most or least, objectively speaking?
Well, having recently found a cut and paste app that manages to superimpose images onto other images, which is really something I've been looking for some time, Tommie. Having recently found that and then deciding to utilize that in our More Than a Game group chat, superimposing More Than a Game onto the Crystal. Well, did I say Crystal Palace? I meant Chelsea.
Freudian slip.
Yeah, I thought that was the perfect kit for our current logo. But I mean, I guess there's different opinions on that. Some people thought it was disgusting.
Look, I went for lunch today. I had a big bowl of laksa, and then at 3:00 I went for a run. Really regretting it, but that kit and More Than a Game combo made me feel worse than I did after running 2 hours after a massive laksa. For me, I thought maybe More Than a Game would look good on the Central Coast. I mean, the Central Coast, it doesn't seem to matter which manager or which players they bring in, they're still terrible. So thought maybe that would be like a good fit for More Than a Game. And that was all I had. But yeah. So, sorry, mate.
I was just going to say we're not a condiment, but we can certainly offer great exposure to soccer Twitter.
Oh dear. All right. The other piece of there were a couple other pieces of football news in the last 24 hours. First one was Ned Stark and David Bowie's love child, Tony Gustafsson, has been appointed the Matildas coach for the next 4 years. That obviously takes the Matildas through the 2023 World Cup that Australia is hosting with New Zealand. Tony is a former US women's national team assistant, and there seems to be generally positive feedback from the football community and media in Australia. I say that because I don't know a hell of a lot about him. It's pretty positive, I guess, that generally speaking, there doesn't seem to be a hell of a lot of negative press about this decision or this appointment. So that's good. The other good bit about this was that Lucas Neal, he made an appearance at the announcement as well. And I mean, Lucas Neal has pretty much disappeared off the face of the earth in the last six, maybe 7 years. I heard he went bankrupt about 4 years ago in the UK. And curiously, Jesse, you'd be interested enough to know that apparently his son plays for the Liverpool Academy at the moment. So there's also that. So just so much news coming out of the UK today. Moving on, though, this afternoon and even this evening, I think one of the final awards was only announced about half an hour ago, was the PFA awards were announced, and there's no actual awards night. So they had to basically announce the awards on Twitter. They did do it quite well. They got False Nine involved and released a few nicely worked little I was going to say pictures, but not quite, to go along with the announcements. And I thought that was a nice sort of way of getting around the awkwardness of doing an awards night without actually having an awards night. The successful awardees were Libby Kakachi won the young male footballer of the year, the Harry Kuehl medal. So that's obviously great for him. And he's just killing it overseas now in the Belgian league after a couple of games. Young female footballer of the year was Ellie Carpenter. Probably no surprises there. Male footballer of the year was Matty Ryan. A little bit surprised, I guess. I thought Adam Taggart might have been a decent shout there after winning the Golden Boot in Korea, but obviously Matty Ryan he's the big Australian, I guess, at the moment, overseas and here in Australia. And the female footballer of the year was, who do you reckon it was, Jesse?
Well,
I'll make it easier for you. I'll make it easy for you. These were the nominees: Emily Van Egmond, Steph Catley, and Sam Kerr.
Well, I would have said Sam Kerr, but I have a funny feeling it might have been Catley.
You're right, mate. Which I got to say was a bit of a surprise to me. But it's these are player voted. And that's the way the cookie crumbled at the end of the day. So look,
Wow.
pretty amazing for Steph Catley. Obviously, she's gone over to the UK with Sam. They're at Chelsea and Arsenal respectively. But obviously, great for Steph to win that award as well. Yeah, so we'll move onto the Premier League now, though. The 6 games that we're going to be covering, some in a little bit more detail than others. A couple of pretty wild results that we're going to cover first up, which is really the catalyst for us doing the pod. First one was West Ham versus Wolves. No, I'm just kidding. We're going to do that in 1 second. But no, first one is Manchester City losing 5-2 to Leicester. Jesse, before we go into, I guess, the run through of the match, this is what you said for your prediction. You said that Man City would win 2-0, but it wouldn't be a blowout.
Yeah, and I ate a huge piece of humble pie. If there's one thing that I'm certainly shit at, that's tipping, and that will continue, I'm sure, for the rest of the season.
Yeah,
obviously
honest, you didn't see it coming, but you feel like you should have seen it coming.
Well, it's funny because
in hindsight,
it's funny because not to bring all things back to FPL, but I was one of the unfortunate bastards who got rid of Vardy this week, and it wasn't because it was a necessity. I didn't really have to, but I actually just thought that Kane might do better in his fixture. And I woke up in the morning and watched the replay and just thought, well, this is how it happens in FPL. Sometimes you win it, and sometimes you don't. But I just the rationale for that decision was that I thought Vardy might score a penalty or something, but I didn't think that he would that anything like that was going to happen. And I think we all knew that City had some vulnerabilities in the sense that they'd had a couple of key players out, and their front line had to sort of adjust to maybe Sterling through the middle, which isn't his best position. But did anyone predict that they were going to get 5 put past them? I mean, that's a mentality issue that I guess we just couldn't see at the Wolves game. So there was no warnings there from the Wolves game to indicate that was going to happen. It was really out of the blue.
Yeah, well, I mean, we'll talk a little bit more about, I think, Wolves, because I think they're useful for the following game when we talk a little bit about West Ham and that game against City. But your point about Vardy, though, like, I mean, he's got form of scoring against City. He's only one of 2. He's the only player that's ever scored a league hat trick against Pep, and now he's done it twice. So, like, I guess Leicester, like, they really channeled 2015-16 era Leicester City on Monday night, and they did it spectacularly. Obviously, there were 3 penalties, but they still scored 2 goals from open play. So obviously, they were no numpties, even taking out the 3 penalties. But look, I guess it's true Pep form to concede 5 goals and then want to go out and then spend another £65 million straight away, isn't it, Jesse?
Yeah, and why not cherry pick out of the great Portuguese league?
Were you aware that Ruben Dias is 21? I didn't realize he was so young.
I didn't realize he was so young. Obviously, I was familiar with him with the Portuguese setup and Benfica, but no, I didn't realize he was that young. It's interesting.
Sorry, keep going, mate.
Oh, it's interesting because Portugal have had quite a few quite old centre-backs with Pep and a couple others there in recent times. So it's interesting that he is so young. I didn't realise either.
Yeah, so that's kind of caught me by surprise a little bit that he's brought in such a young defender, and obviously Otamendi's gone the opposite way to Benfica as well after he was sort of shopped around a little bit. And that sort of solves one problem now that they've got another central defender in, and it looks like Eric Garcia is going to be leaving as well, although probably isn't too popular around Manchester at the moment anyway after a pretty terrible performance anyway. I have to say, though, although Ruben Dias, his transfer now brings Pep spending on defenders at City to £408 million, which is like it's not even the size of a small country. It is like a small country these days. Pep seems to still have, I guess, a problem, I guess, with that squad in terms of leadership. And Ruben Dias, whilst he's a player that's got a lot of potential, he's still very young, he's still very inexperienced. And I just wonder if we're going to be here in 12 months' time talking about City's inability to, I guess, defend against the not necessarily the counter, but when teams are able to play through that counter press and they get onto their back four, and we're saying, oh yeah, who's Pep going to go out and spend 50, 60 million pounds on again? Like, I just feel like I feel like we've been here before.
Well, I think, this is a great segue to the fact that we just recently bought a koala mattress. And if you compare Ruben Dias to a koala mattress, well, that's what Pep's hoping he's going to be. He thinks he's upgraded. And he sent the old mattress, the one that they've got a few years out of, but is now a piece of shit, Otamendi, the other way. So he's essentially moved that problem and replaced it with a solution. But I guess the question is Dias going to become that koala mattress? Or is he going to be essentially just a run-of-the-mill, overpriced City player? That'll be the question ahead of us. But I think as far as his qualities and his youth, I mean, it's good to see a young defender come in, because it's always great to see, especially that so quickly, to get promoted into a Premier League position. But the issue is with some of these teams is they don't have kind of a rock solid centre back already there to just pair them with. I mean, I suppose City will say that's Laporte, but Laporte's injured so much that you can't sort of, I mean, last season, for example, Van Dijk started, I think, every game.
Exactly.
Now Laporte, like, I think we'd all want him to try and start every game because he's a great player, but he hasn't been able to demonstrate his body hasn't been able to handle a long run of games. So if you can't rely on him to be your kind of like point of reference for these other centre backs to come in, that puts all the pressure on Dias and I guess Nathan Ake and stuff like that. So I'm a bit concerned about the pressure. It's kind of like Thiago Silva, but at the complete other end of the age spectrum. Lots of pressure and scrutiny.
Lots of pressure indeed. Yeah, and I guess I wonder if it's even a little bit unfair on Ruben Dias. Like, he's kind of going to be stepping into a squad where, like, the defense is almost under a little bit of pressure straight up. We talked a little bit about Pep and City, I guess, but look, should we be putting some respect on Brendan Rodgers' name after this result?
Yeah, like, because I think I was looking at the formation early in the week, and I'm pretty sure he had Barnes and Vardy on either side with was it Pratt? He was in the middle, sort of pinning the balls out to them. And that was really interesting, because I don't think I've actually seen him. I mean, maybe I just haven't watched enough Leicester City, but I don't think I've seen that strategy before. And it was a strategic win. It's like we talk about it a little bit with managers and formations and things like that. And sometimes it's a bit of a non-event, but this was a genuine win for Rodgers because he clearly meticulously planned this out.
And not only that, I think that's one, I guess, key part to their strategy and the effectiveness of it. But also, like, they basically took a leaf out of Rafa Benitez's book as well and said, all right, well, we think we're good, but we're not quite good enough to be able to go toe to toe on by playing sort of a high press against City, and said, all right, we're going to sit back, we're going to play five at the back. And whilst it was a genuine five at the back, sort of defensively, you saw Castagna, he got forward and provided I think it was the second goal or the third goal, I think, for Vardy. So it was quite defensive without the ball and very, very compact. But you saw that, I guess, what was his name? James Justin and Castagna. They both were very effective going forward as well.
Well, so, that five man, like that's a very much a Wolves kind of out of their playbook, and you have to wonder how much Rodgers has sort of looked at the way that Wolves has managed to affect City. I mean, I know that the recent result was a bit poor from Wolves, but previous to that, they've been the thorn in City's side. So maybe the formation choice was kind of based on that as well.
Well, I think it shows that, like, you're starting to see a little bit of a formula for how to play against Pep, and obviously you need a little bit of luck. You need to have some of them to have an off day. You need to have a little bit of luck with, like, the ball sort of popping up to the goalkeeper at the right times and stuff like that. And your defenders all need to play well. Your midfielders need to press and be all their game as well. But you see, like, Pep's teams, they now get beaten. I'm going to say routinely, the same way by the same types of teams and teams that try to do something a little bit different. They just get tonked, I guess. And but like I was saying, you still need plenty of luck to be able to go on against this City side.
Well, think about it. The times in City's history where they've managed to come back from a goal down. Aguero at Burnley, not last season, but the season before, crucial goal. Aguero against Queen's Park Rangers, crucial goal. And he also scored one, I can't remember if it was against Brighton, to pull it back in that final day, the season before last as well. So they've actually had a few players that have managed to pull games back, but generally speaking, when City have it their own way, they just annihilate teams in the first 20 minutes, and then they don't have to worry about coming back. And I guess the question I have is, how much resilience is in that team? And you talked about leaders. I'm not going to compare everything to Liverpool because we shouldn't, but I guess the reason why I do is because it's obviously City's biggest rival. And one of the things about Liverpool is that if you didn't have Henderson there 1 week, which we didn't this week, just been, then you replace that person with Van Dijk, or you replace that leader with Milner. You have like 3 or 4 players that you can say that person could be captain if that person's not on the pitch. City, like, that was a real concern. Like, as you said earlier, they've thrown a lot of money at the squad, but have they bought enough leaders? And Company leaving was more than just a centre-back problem. It was a talisman.
Not only that, like you look at Kevin De Bruyne and he looks like one of the sort of almost like he looks like the only senior player out there now. You've got obviously the team is stacked with talent, but Kevin De Bruyne looks like the sole leader out there, and it's a very sort of, I'm not sure of the right word of how to describe them, but I mean, with David Silva leaving and Company leaving, like this is a bit of an undercooked team, I think now. Like it's really just Kevin De Bruyne, and like Aguero has never really. He's always been someone that sort of leads by example. He's not that sort of big booming personality, I guess. And I think it's going to be a bit of a disappointing season for Man City moving forward. I think they're still going to be very good on their day, but I think they're starting to look like they may not necessarily be as competitive as we maybe once thought. I don't know. That's obviously after 2 games, so I'm sure I'll be eating my words in about 2 or 3 weeks. But look, moving on though to obviously, like I was saying a little bit earlier, the big result of the round. In fact, we put this one to the More Than a Game Twitter followers, and we asked what was the most surprising result, whether West Ham beating Wolves or City losing to Leicester was the bigger result. And actually, 51% of our followers thought that West Ham beating Wolves was actually a more surprising result. So there you go. So and look, Scotty and I were pretty pessimistic about West Ham's chances as well on Sunday when we recorded the pod as well. So Scotty actually predicted Wolves to win 2-1, but I don't think anyone, even the most optimistic of West Ham supporters, would have expected West Ham to just roll away with it and win 4-0. Just you mentioned a little bit earlier about how City looked pretty comfortable against Wolves, but I mean we were just sort of saying how like City aren't quite there at the moment. I think Wolves really must have made City look really good the week before, because I mean Wolves are so underdone, aren't they?
Yeah, I'm not really sure how to. I think I look at that Wolves team and they've had a little bit of disruption with Doherty going, but apart from that, like I don't really understand why it's been a sluggish start for them. And I mean, I guess a lot of it can be a bit of confidence has been knocked out of them after the City game to start. Not a good way to start the season. But I mean, they took that game to relatively to the late stages. City didn't get the sort of the 3rd goal, I think it was, until the very end. So they still showed some resilience, but they didn't show resilience at West Ham, and they really got bulldozed in the end and didn't even register a goal. And this is meant to be one of the best defences in the league. In fact, it was kind of being talked about as the best defence in the league. So yeah, really, really concerning. The thing is for them is that next week they've got Fulham, and two form lines that haven't been particularly good. And I think all of us expect Wolves to bite back and really destroy Fulham. But I mean, Fulham are pretty embarrassed at the moment with their own performances. So what do you think about Wolves? Do we think that they're going to be able to bounce back? It's the perfect fixture to do it if they are going to do it.
That is a very good shout, about maybe Fulham thinking that they can see off this Wolves side at the moment. Because, I mean, this will now, I guess, be Wolves' third game and Fulham's fourth. So you would think that Wolves would be coming up to speed by now. But, I mean, Fulham, like we might see that with a couple of extra games under their belt, this could be a really good game for them. And I think Fulham will see this as a real chance for them to, I guess, to start their season belatedly a little bit. But look, enough about Fulham. Like they're bullshit and they're boring, and no one cares about them anyway. More about West Ham, mate. I've got to say this was probably one of the best West Ham performances like I've seen for a long time. I actually woke up at halftime. It showed here in Oz I think it was 4 o'clock kickoff, and I rolled over and at about 5 o'clock and saw the time, checked the score, and went, all right, I'll get up and I'll watch the second half. And I was pretty pessimistic. I thought, West Ham, I think we're one of the worst teams in terms of holding on to a result, even if we score first. And I thought, look, I'm going to get up and I'm probably going to concede and I'm going to be disappointed and it's going to ruin my Monday. But to get up and see a really good West Ham performance and West Ham to score 3 goals in the second half was really surprising. I thought the partnership of Souček and Rice is really, really coming along nicely. And I guess they're two players that are both really commanding physically, and they both want to win a header. They're both good in the tackle, both efficient with possession, and they're letting players like Bowen and Fornals just kind of do their thing and making and creating chances, I guess, for Antonio as well, who was probably a little bit unlucky not to get on the score sheet himself in this one as well. So obviously, Jared Bowen scored 2 goals, but look, I want to give a bit of a shout out to Fornals. He was one of my boys last season, and he had a pretty disappointing season, but he's a very divisive figure. He seems to. There are two schools of thought. One is that like he's too slight, doesn't work hard enough, not good enough on the ball, gives away the ball too easily. And then there's another school of thought that he's actually a very handy technical player, and he's not a left midfielder, he's a central midfielder, and playing him out on the left is really tough on him. But I thought Fornals is really growing into the league very well, and I think he's still only 22, 23. So good signs, I think, for the next couple of years, I think, for Fornals at West Ham, I think. So was there anything else that stood out for you with this one, Jesse?
Well, I just imagine that there were a lot of people woken up on Lygon Street the other day, 6 o'clock in the morning or something, and you're probably heel clicking your way down the street, to grab a coffee and maybe a bit of a whistling going on. And I'm sure you were in a very buoyant mood after that performance, Tommie, and well earned. Let's be honest here, because I mean, apart from some lovely moments post lockdown. Post the reopening of the restart and Antonio's 4-goal haul and all that sort of stuff, have you really seen anything decent out of West Ham for a while? It's been a pretty grim time. The pod on the weekend definitely felt like we were reading a bit of a eulogy about West Ham Football Club. So great to see you, perked up about their performance again. And to be honest, maybe David Moyes should manage from Zoom, manage from home in his living room every week. I mean, it seems to work.
I think there were plenty of people that were watching that game thinking, plenty of people who are managers in their day job thinking, oh, geez, I just wish I could get a tune out of my team like that while I'm working from home. Oh, dear. Alrighty. We'll move on to from my team to your team, Jesse, on to Liverpool hosting Arsenal. And this was arguably might have been maybe the pick of the fixtures in terms of two teams that look like they're in good form. And there's been plenty of optimism around both clubs, I guess, at the beginning of this season. But it didn't really play out that way. And whilst there's been plenty of optimism about Arsenal's season, they I guess in some ways sort of struggled to lay a glove on Liverpool a little bit. Whilst they were in the game, I think the score finished 3-1, and I think a lot of people would say it was probably a pretty fair recollection of the match.
Yeah, it was. It was. Like, I mean, even the most sort of dogged Arsenal supporter will say that apart from Lacazette having a decent chance to equalise in the second half, it would have been an opportunist draw or an opportunist victory for Arsenal. It wouldn't be based on them dominating the ball in possession. And I'm not one of those people that thinks that you need to dominate possession to win a game. But there was more than just that with Liverpool's performance. Whenever Arsenal were pressing them, you had both Van Dijk and Gomez who could play these long diagonals to Salah and Mane. Mane had one of his best games so far, and he just doesn't he never seems to have a drop in form. He was just brilliant.
He loves playing big teams, doesn't he? He just eats them up.
He does. And finally, Trent started to click back into gear a little bit. He was a little bit slow in the first two games, but he was back. And I think mentality-wise, I was impressed with Robertson, considering he had made such a howler, and then he goes back down the other end and scores himself. So I think this is exhibiting a lot of traits that you only get from winning and winning a lot. And so I was pretty pleased with the response to going down. From the Arsenal perspective, considering how early it is in the reign with Arteta, it is. I mean, it is still relatively early. He hasn't managed a job
for a year yet.
Exactly. So with the squad he has, I mean, I've actually compared them to Liverpool before because of the fact that they feel like a Liverpool a few years ago, where they were able to beat anybody on their day, but at the same time, they're still building. They're still sort of getting their squad right. And Arteta has to work with the combination of great talent and deadwood in the same squad. So it's going to take a couple of seasons to flush out that deadwood. So that will mean that there will be the odd shocking performance, but things are still looking good for them. And they did try something a bit different, whereas Chelsea have sat back.
Whenever you talk about Arsenal now, I'm going to be thinking about the HBO drama from the early 2000s, Deadwood now.
Well, I mean, whatever you want to associate with Arsenal, that's your choice, mate. I'm not going to throw them under the bus. But what I will say is that they have this... they obviously have a bit of a point of difference because, Chelsea decided they were just going to sit back and just sort of block it out for the red card. Arsenal also sat back, but they had this idea that they were going to try and beat the offside trap. And most of the time it didn't work, except for that time that Lacazette got through and there was a good opportunity. So they look like the kind of team that have more resilience than they did before. They used to be a bit of a walkover, and now they actually are showing a lot of backbone. So plenty of good signs for them. But it's just one of those things where I always felt if we turned up and played our football, we would overcome them. And I think it was just the intensity of the press that eventually wore them out. They looked like they were absolutely knackered in the last 15 minutes.
And mate, I think that's a good point. I asked Killian what his thoughts were on the game, and particularly asked him about the selection of Gabriel. Excuse pronunciation. What is he? Magalia. Yep, Gabriel, and he
Magalhaes, I think it is.
I think you're right. Asked about his him being dropped and David Luiz being selected instead. And he said that he thought David Luiz had a good game, but he seemed very uncomfortable when under pressure from Liverpool's press. He also said that David Luiz might be a better passer who can get out of tight spot, but he was still a little bit disappointing with the last goal with that defensive header, which went straight to Jota for a perfect place for his shot. He did also say, and I thought this was interesting because this sort of played into like some of the reasons for why Arteta might have dropped Gabriel. And he said that he thought Arteta might be trying to ease Gabriel into life in the Prem, especially as his first few fixtures for Arsenal were pretty easy on paper. And then you get to Liverpool, and obviously that's a totally different kettle of fish in comparison to Liverpool. To Fulham and West Ham. So. Interesting signs ahead, and I think that's actually a pretty smart man management from Arteta to decide to not play him in that big match in his third game for Arsenal, and that way, like we've seen that before, where you have new players and they look good, and then into their third or fourth game, and then they make a bad mistake or something like that in a big match, and then all of a sudden sort of the wheels start to come off. So Gabriel, I think he's only 24, so I think that's a good move by Arteta, and maybe that was an indication of what he actually thought about Arsenal's chances heading into that game. Also asked Killian about whether or not the result sort of was a bit of a setback in terms of his enthusiasm. He said it was good to get these games out of the way so that they know where Arsenal's level is at the moment. Arsenal are a better side, but he was still encouraged by what Arteta is building. And whilst Arsenal, were outplayed for most of the match, we hung out and nearly should have made it 2-2. Good character shown and positive signs. So it's interesting take, I guess, from Killian that still plenty of optimism around the Emirates at the moment. There's one final thing around this match, and it didn't actually happen in the match. It actually happened afterwards, which was Jesse, what did you make of Roy Keane's post-match comments and Klopp's aggressive counter-press?
Yeah, it seemed like it was blown a little bit out of proportion. I mean, Klopp heard what he'd said on the speaker and then called him out, and I just enjoyed it, even though I think, you know, when you actually read it, like when you actually saw what Keane said, he didn't say anything that was that. He is known for his shithousery, but he wasn't actually winding anyone up at that. But it's just the fact that Klopp caught that little part of conversation and took offence. Funny on two levels. Funny because sometimes Klopp misunderstands things and sort of gets really prickly, but also funny because Keane is just, no one ever calls Keane out on anything. Keane just says whatever he wants, and everyone just sort of goes, okay. And it was just really funny. Like, I've never actually seen Keane look like that, where he just looks so uncomfortable. Yeah, it was interesting dynamic.
They should have called it Gegenpresser.
Gegenpresser. Oh, jeez. So I was just seeing Sal popping up on the chat there.
Yeah. So look, before we move on, Superfan Sal he's throwing out the big game already. He's saying that Jesse and Sal should have a gentleman's bet next time Arsenal play Liverpool. Jesse, I reckon you'd be up for that, wouldn't you?
Well, next time's at the Emirates Stadium, so that's a very convenient time to do it, Sal. So we'll see how the season unfolds.
See if we're still playing by that point with all the players dropping like flies with coronavirus. Another thing that's a bit like a virus at the moment is the number of handball decisions and penalties that are floating around the league. I'll tell you what, to be honest, Jesse, there's not much I think to talk about with this Newcastle Spurs game, but pretty much the only thing that anyone is talking about is that handball at the end by Eric Dyer, which led to the penalty in the 97th minute. So, look, I've heard this referred to as it's ruining the game, or some people have said I can't watch it, as in the Premier League anymore, whilst there's these shocking penalties. And I think a lot of people would agree that they're a little bit tough to watch and so forth. But still, you've got to consider it a little bit hysterical, I think. What did you make of, I guess, not just this penalty, but I guess all of these penalties and the handball rule?
Well, it's all fun and games until it happens to your team, I think, is the general trend here. I think people sort of have a wee chuckle when it happens to other teams, but as soon as it happens to your team, it gets serious, and you think, well, we just got robbed of a point or a win. We talked about this in the first part of this pod when we were looking at the Brighton Manchester United game, and even then, and that was just a couple of we didn't have a lot of data to go on, but we had a couple of games which showed that this was becoming a problem. The Palace Everton game as well, of course. And after that, subsequently, since our last pod, there's been even more drama. And I just think it's incredible. It was one game week, and there was a number of times where it came up. I don't know if it was all just coincidence, but the Newcastle game was another one where it'll be debated to the end of the day. I sort of stand by what I said in the last pod, where I feel it's just too brutal to award a penalty for an accidental handball. And I think Scott had it right when he said it depends if it's accidental or not, and that's obviously the ref's interpretation. But it's just, for me, it's too brutal a punishment. It's the difference between losing the game in some cases, completely changing your strategy, parking the bus. It's just, for me, there's so much money in the Premier League as well. People getting promoted, relegated. It's just, it can't be just down to something that's so trivial.
The stakes have become people off. The stakes have become so high, I guess, that like there's such a, people are holding on so tight to every decision needing to be correct. that it's almost, I guess, so I did see on the socials in the last couple of days about a reference back to Ireland and that World Cup qualifier, and whilst we're not talking about qualifiers for the World Cup, the stakes are equally high every week in the Premier League, because there's so much money at stake, and especially if your team is trying to make it into the Premier League, into the Champions League, huge amounts of money there on offer. But if you're a team that's fighting to stay in the division, then obviously you're scrapping for every bloody point. And so like the stakes are so high that you can't just shrug your shoulders and say, oh, well, I guess we didn't get the rub of the green this week, because in some cases, like we've seen with the likes of Sunderland and Pompey go down and on and on and on into other divisions, but like it can lead to like the death of your club. So it really is I guess it's a strange time, I guess, for football in general with regards to this.
I'd be happy with just an indirect free kick. I mean, I might end up saying this a million times this season, and I don't think they'll change the rule. But an indirect free kick for an accidental handball, at least the defending team gets an opportunity to put up some kind of wall and make it a bit more difficult. Because a penalty is just like, you could 2-foot a bloke in the box, and it's the same punishment for an accidental handball. Doesn't make sense to me.
I think that's a great shout to roll out that idea again of suggesting that it becomes an indirect free kick for handball in the box. I think that's a great idea. That'd solve probably two birds with one stone, I think. Moving on though to the Yorkshire Derby or the Pie Derby as it's been dubbed. Jesse, you said that Sheffield United would win this one, and they'd be too desperate for the win, and yeah, it's another
great pick.
Prediction. Yeah.
My opponent in FPL had Bamford as captain, and I was watching to the end. I was just like, as long as Bamford doesn't score here, that'll be nice. And he scored with about 3 minutes to go. Fantastic.
Oh dear. This was actually, I saw the first half of this live, and obviously we were getting Damo's reactions live in the group as well. And this was a pretty interesting game. This was a lot of fun, I thought. And obviously we had overlapping centre backs versus Bielsa ball, and both teams were really going for it, I thought. Even though sort of Sheffield United can maybe play a little bit defensive sometimes with 3 or 5 at the back, some of their interplay, I thought, through the middle and even around like that around the Leeds box against Leeds' press, I thought was really fun to watch. But did you think that Leeds were deserving of a 1-0 win?
I don't know, like over maybe the fact that they really pushed and created chances in the second half, but I don't know. I would have been probably content with that game finishing 0-0 with a draw. I thought that both teams had a go, but they kind of cancelled each other out. One of the comments Damo was saying was that Wilder did a good job against Bielsa. And I guess, regardless of the result, you can't really argue with that. I mean, apart from a really good opportunist goal, Sheffield seemed to keep Leeds relatively quiet. So I think a good standout for Leeds was Dallas. I thought Dallas did a great job progressing forward. We talk a lot about Aileen, but it was really impressive to see Dallas basically playing in between a left wing back and a left centre mid. He kind of just kept floating between the two roles. So he was a bit of a standout for me. Harrison, again, impressed. I think Harrison missed the last game, so he sort of came back and picked up where he left off against Liverpool. But on the Sheffield United side, yeah, I think a couple of the injuries are starting to show defensively, and that's, it always sucks to see a team that hasn't got their best team out on the pitch, and it may well be like that for several weeks for Sheffield. So they only have a few days left in the transfer window to try and remedy that if they're going to get anyone in.
Yeah, I mean, they were so fortunate with injuries last season, and it's sort of now in swings and roundabouts, they're almost getting punished for last season's good luck. So kind of feel for them a little bit. They were a little bit unlucky as well to not go up 1-0 after Lord Lundstrom, or the footballer formerly known as Lord Lundstrom. He had a really good chance saved by Meslier. And I don't know about you, Jesse, and this is probably a little bit over the top, but this save reminded, well, not just this save, but Meslier reminds me a little bit of early days De Gea, where he's like this skinny, lanky, young-looking foreign goalkeeper who looks like he's got no reason whatsoever to be playing in the Premier League, but he holds his own and he does well. And that save in particular for me, that was a really strong save, which belied, I guess, sort of his physical appearance. Let's call it that.
Yeah, no, it was a really, really big save, and obviously when you look at the context of the result, a huge save.
Yeah, well, I think if Sheffield United go up 1-0 at that point, they've got probably half the game to be played. But not only that, I think Sheffield United might have changed their approach as well. And I mean, it changes the game dramatically. I think once one of the teams changes their approach as well.
The forgotten part about that as well, I'll just add, is that the lead up to that was beautiful. It was such a well worked lead up from Sheffield United that they constructed it beautifully. And it was just like, at the time, it wasn't just the fact that it was a great save. It was just that how did they deny them that beautiful goal? It was going to be a great goal. So, yeah.
It was one of those ones where you want it to be a goal just because the lead-up play was so good.
Yeah.
One of the other promoted teams, though, and we've kind of touched upon Fulham a little bit already, Fulham got tonked again, 3-0, this time by Aston Villa. And Aston Villa fans, they'd be very happy. They kept their second consecutive clean sheet under Emi Martinez. So that's great for them. I think it's their first time in 4 years that they've kept back-to-back clean sheets in the Premier League. So obviously pretty fantastic result for them. Goals from Jack Grealish, Conor Hourihane and Tyrone Mings were enough for Villa to get all 3 points. And I guess it was another pretty ordinary drab performance from Fulham, to the point where Fulham chairman Tony Khan posted on Twitter afterwards. He said, I apologise to the Fulham supporters for our performance tonight. We've looked at 2 centre-backs since Wembley. I'm sorry we haven't yet, as 2 got COVID.
That's right. I read that tweet.
I'm sorry we haven't yet, as 2 got COVID and we lost a 3 we thought was close. Plus another issue with a 4th centre-back. I promise players in, plus better efforts from this squad. I should and will apologise repeatedly for that performance. I'm sorry, everybody. We all need to do a better job. Everybody at the club for the past year worked really hard to get the team up, and now we need to work significantly harder to stay up. I promise better efforts than today. So obviously, not just... It's not just, I guess, the footballing world that's starting to notice that some of the performances from Fulham aren't good enough. And look, I guess whilst so far I think a lot of people would have said that West Brom and Fulham were going to struggle, obviously this weekend we saw West Brom put in a pretty decent performance against big spending Chelsea. But I mean, this Fulham team, like, it looks pretty grim, I guess, for them at the moment. And yeah, it's hard to say where they're going to get points from, but I mean,
if we had an own goal, like if we were doing own goals tonight, I would have put that directly as an own goal. Like, why is it the sporting director? Why is he coming out and saying that with only a few games gone? I mean, if we're talking about game week 9 or game week 10, and you've just had a shocker at home, and you know we've given Scott Parker a decent run. And chance to sort of remedy things, then maybe it's a different conversation. But how does this actually help?
Man, it's West Ham areas for, like, because he's not even the sporting director; he's the chairman, he's the owner.
Oh, see, that's I didn't
it's
even
even
know
worse.
That. That's just unbelievable, because it's just
and
the way he was speaking, it's like it's like he was just on the phone to the manager, but he's not on the phone to the manager. He's speaking to millions and millions of people on Twitter who are reading what he's saying. It was so conversational, that tweet, that it just felt uncomfortable reading it, because it just felt like you shouldn't be putting this out in the public domain. You should be doing the work behind the scenes to fix this. And how awkward was it for Scott Parker when the reporters were asking him about it after the game, and he's got to sort of field questions on it, and he's like, I don't actually know what he said. I need to obviously go see what he said. But and then later on, he's got to sort of awkwardly say, yeah, it's not that helpful. Well, obviously, it's not helpful. It's terrible. And for me, like, I mean, I know this is a weird comparison, but it's like with City just going out and buying a new centre back. It's like, what does that do for the squad? Like, because the squad do read the papers, the squad do actually, check out social media now and again. And what does that do for your own confidence if you're a Nathan Ake, or in this case, you look at some of the players in the centre backs for Fulham? What does that do to your confidence? And not just to your confidence. Say you're a centre mid, and you're basically best mates with the centre back, at Fulham, and then you see your mate just basically being told, well, once we get a better player, we'll kick you out. It's a really toxic way of looking after your squad. You have to remember they're a squad, they're a team. They talk to each other. They've got personalities, and you don't want to piss everyone off because it will make the performances even worse.
It's not Football Manager.
Yeah, got to keep them happy, mate. That's the takeaway.
Yeah, but I mean, look, I have to say, like, I think I totally overestimated Fulham from the perspective of, like, everyone remembers Fulham from when they were in the Premier League last time, and they tried to come out and play attacking football, and they were terrible. I thought with Scott Parker, and they would probably play a more sort of pragmatic style, and they would have a better chance. But I don't know if the squad's even better since from 2 years ago. I think the squad's worse. It just seems, yeah. Well, there's that, but like they at least at the time they brought in a bunch of like Premier League quality players, whereas now, like in the past 12 months, they've signed a whole bunch of championship level players on, like, not small money. Like I think it was either Cavallero or Bobby Reed, and I think they paid 20 million, I think, for one of them at least, and like that's not small change. And like
It's
Bobby Reed
money.
Yeah, but like you would expect that team, I guess, would be doing far better than what they are. And I guess, yes, they've got some injuries, as the chairman said, but yeah, look, things are pretty grim, I guess, for Fulham. And as you mentioned earlier on in the show, Jesse, about how this is a really good opportunity for them coming up with Wolves in the next round in a couple of days' time. They really need a result out of this, and not just a result, I guess, but a good performance as well. So if they get a result and a good performance, I think maybe they can get their season back on track. But look, and everyone knows that, like, Wolves are a very good side. If they can't get something out of this game and a good result, they need both. Not necessarily a win, but they need something.
If it stays this way, Big Sam's coming in. Big Sam's coming in for Fulham. He's out of a job. Get him in there. Poor Scott Parker might be out before Christmas.
Well, mate, you never know. Like, that's probably not a bad shout, because I mean, Fulham, like, we know that they want to stay up. Like, they spent the money to get back into the division. So yeah, look, that's maybe not a bad shout. And Big Sam, he's been out of a job, I think, since the England job, wasn't it? And that was what, 2-3 years ago. So I don't know. Maybe he's on his way back.
Mm.
Alrighty. That wraps things up for tonight, though. Thanks for joining in on our midweek pod. Of course, we'll be uploading this in the next day or so to Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and so on, wherever you get your audio on demand. Don't forget, you can always get a hold of us at mtagpodcast@gmail. We're also on Twitter and Facebook for memes, banter, and just, I guess, our take on the world of football at the moment. So until next time, enjoy the football.